Did we finally get the truth about how people end up in the digital circus? What's the real connection between Pomni and Ribbit? All of this and so much more was hidden throughout episode 5, and today we're breaking down every secret detail and reference that'll completely change the way you see the digital circus. We'll start with the smaller Easter eggs, like this teapot right here. At first glance, it might seem random, but it's actually a giant nod to the entire 3D animation community. That's because it's a reference to the Utah teapot, a legendary model that's basically become an inside joke and iconic symbol in the world of 3D animation. Now let's move on and listen closely to Kane's opening speech.
Welcome back, my candy hearts and paper flowers!
If you caught it, the line, "Hello my candy hearts and paper flowers," wasn't just some random quirky intro. It's actually a direct reference to Raggedy Ann and Andy musical adventure. And what makes that even more interesting is that, right as Kane says it, the only character left in the shot is Regatha. Well, aside from Pomni, but let's be honest, given her state at that point, she barely counts. Now, if we take a second to look back at Kane's possible adventure options.
So I've got an adventure where you all tour my amazing magic chocolate factory and get killed off one by one from OSHA violations, one where a sentient cardiovascular system goes to war against the United States military, and one where you have to survive in a post-apocalyptic nuclear wasteland with a telepathic talking dog who's mean to you the whole time. What do you think?
It's pretty easy to spot that one of them is a clear nod to Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. And as for the second one, there's a solid theory floating around that it references I have no mouth and I must scream, which, fun fact, is basically one of the core inspirations behind the entire concept of the digital circus. And while we're still on this scene, let's rewind and take a look at another line of dialogue that ties into all of this.
Just keep your adventures open at all times and let us do whatever we want when we want.
Are you hearing this, Bubble? The Toy Box character wants us to leave the other intelligent AIs to run for a prolonged period of time.
Disgusting!
This is where things get a lot more interesting because technically, Zooble actually came up with a pretty solid idea and Kane shot it down instantly. But why? There are two possible explanations here. First off, let's not forget how Gummy Goo ended up in the digital circus. If multiple access points were opened, it's almost guaranteed that some kind of rogue AI would eventually slip into the circus grounds, causing total chaos and destabilizing the entire system. And second, it's very possible that the digital circus just isn't powerful enough to handle multiple adventures running at the same time. Fun fact, this whole scene is also a subtle nod to I have no mouth and I must scream. Now, while Poacher's Paradise didn't give us much in terms of hidden details, things started getting way more interesting once we got to the White House adventure. Inside Pomni's office, we see tons of paintings, one with a dog, one featuring Jax, one showing an abstracted monster, and even one with Zooble. Oh, and one of the books on her desk actually references Pomni's so-called original name from pilot episode. And this is exactly where things start to get really wild.
Oi, mate! I'm an Australian extremist, and I've come to detonate this bomb that'll release all the world's deadliest spiders into... Did I pick a bad time?
I think a lot of you figured out why Jax had that kind of reaction and why that one line hit so hard after that moment. Of course, it's a direct reference to the infamous Clinton Lewinsky scandal. And hey, if you're curious, feel free to look up the details online, but we're here to talk about the digital circus. During the anime-style adventure, you can spot that every character has their own locker, another callback to the Utah teapot, a nod to Kane, and even a reference to the Gaslight District. On top of that, we saw a hidden Easter egg featuring Mel on the wall during the scene where Jax is talking to Pomni, and right after that, Pomni brings up that scene from episode 2. During the stargazing moment, the big takeaway was the reveal that Jax once had a friend who ended up becoming an abstracted monster, though let's be real, that part's already pretty obvious to most viewers. We also finally got a close-up of the Ferris wheel, and fun fact, the moon is voiced by none other than Gooseworx herself. But what's even more interesting is this next part.
Also, she's dumb and she looks weird.
I think we all look weird.
Excuse you, this is what peak male performance looks like. My ears and tail are kind of the pinnacle of masculinity.
You don't have a tail.
What are you talking about? Yes, I do. What the? Where's my tail? How long have I not had my tail?
I have never seen you with a tail.
Jax was more than convinced he had a tail, a throwback to his original design. Even though there aren't many images or concept arts of Jax with a tail online, I did manage to find one official concept art showing Jax rocking that very tail. But honestly, that's not even the craziest thing the developers hid in episode 5. After the stargazing scene, the characters head into an intermission, and amid all the chaos, we get shots of Zooble, Pomni, and Jax posing like they're on early 2000s music album covers. And of course we can't skip the scene where Jax is sprinting full speed toward a door marked with a ribbit. It's pretty easy to guess he turned into an abstracted monster, but check out how he's running specifically toward that door. If you were paying close attention, you probably noticed the first door had Kaufmo's image on it, meaning this event happens after Kaufmo's funeral. And if we remember that scene, it's quite likely that Jax ran off to visit his old friend right after the events of episode 2. It's also pretty obvious that this is the very character Gooseworx named Ribbit, and if you look at him for more than 2 seconds, it becomes clear he's a frog. Now remember that earlier shot where Pomni is sitting as a frog? What's even funnier is that Pomni was originally supposed to be a frog too, but ended up becoming the jester because of Jax. I'll explain all of that a bit later, but for now, let's switch scenes to the bar where Pomni shared a pretty interesting story.
I was an accountant for a supermarket chain.
A supermarket? How'd you end up here?
Well, I sometimes got bored of things, and I would seek out mild thrills, like exploring abandoned buildings, you know.
I don't think many people really caught this story, especially the part where Pomni mentioned exploring abandoned buildings. It might have slipped past most, but the sharpest viewers noticed she said this right after Jax asked how she ended up in the digital circus. And that's where things get both kind of creepy and insanely intriguing, especially if you pay close attention to what the characters say next.
I sometimes did that. I wouldn't record it, though. Here's your Cosmo.
Thanks. I worked in real estate for a bit until I ended up here. I'm sure she doesn't miss me.
Keep in mind, it's been confirmed that Pomni and Zooble explored abandoned buildings, while Ragatha worked at a real estate agency. It makes perfect sense that she could have entered one of those buildings to evaluate it for renovation and resale. So that's already 3 characters connected to an abandoned building, which likely plays a big role in how they all ended up in the digital circus. There's a strong possibility that inside this abandoned building, there's some kind of server, maybe the one linked to that headset, which transfers people's consciousness into the digital circus. And if the building is truly abandoned, chances are none of them are alive anymore in the real world. Gotta admit, that's pretty damn intriguing. But hey, let's switch to something less dark. Everyone remembers Jax's story, right?
I thought you'd never ask. Well, after my lung cancer diagnosis, me and my junkie associate from a chemistry class I used to teach
Yeah, I figured. How about you, Gangle?
Hey, I wasn't done.
If you're gonna make shit up, at least be creative about it. I know what you're referencing.
Was that a reference to something?
And if, like Ragatha, you still didn't catch what that was referencing, I gotta say, I'm kinda jealous, cause you haven't watched Breaking Bad yet. Jax was basically telling his story from Walter White's point of view. Oh, and just a fun fact, the bar's called Radical. Now, let's head over to the last adventure, the stadium where Kinger immediately dropped some knowledge.
I may not know what's going on, or who is going on, or when is going on, or why is going on, but I do know where is going on, and it's out on that field.
His speech is a nod to the classic Abbott and Costello sketch, Who's on First? But the real fun starts later. Before that, let's quickly run through some of the smaller Easter eggs. We spot C and A again, which most likely stands for Kane and Albert, not Cain and Abel, like some thought at first. There's an ad for some burger joint, and since we know Glitch is based in Australia, that's probably a shout out to the local franchise Hungry Jack's, which is basically Burger King down under. We also get another reference to Gummy Goo, plus nods to Spudsies and even Kaufmo, but the real gem is hidden in this very scene.
She's cool. Wait, what's that?
The most obvious thing I noticed is that Gangle called for a vote right after Jax said that evil Pomni is cool. I'm not trying to read too much into it, but to me that moment felt pretty strange, especially seeing how Gangle's expression changed. Also, I caught that Pomni didn't vote for Jax to turn into a maid, which is a nod to an old concept art. Even cooler, Jax's eyes as a maid match exactly what we saw in those early concept sketches. That probably means Jax was originally meant to be human, while Pomni was supposed to be an animal, but something went sideways. Oh. And of course, that whole scene is a perfect throwback to the classic Cats and Cucumbers meme. And that wraps up our video. If I missed any cool references or Easter eggs, feel free to drop them in the comments. See you next time.